Okay, guys, I'm back. So, today I want to try something different. This is going to be kind of an experiment for me here. So, I was yesterday. I hope I didn't realize that I'm kind of getting the jump on Seth. I hope he's Sethikus. I hope he's okay with that. We did this interview yesterday, and he was kind enough to ask me to come and have a video chat with him, and he interviewed me about some questions that he had. To be honest with you, I don't even remember what the hell I said. So what I'm going to be doing here in this Q&A video is I'm going to experiment. I'm going to replay you the raw video that he sent me of that. And what I'm going to do is, every 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, I will stop the playback, and I will come back on either to comment about what I had said or to take questions. I don't know if Sethikus is out there today. If he is more than welcome to come on and answer any questions people might have for him about some of the things that he said. I mean, he allowed me to do most of the talking, and I have every intention to interview him and do the same thing and interview him. He's got some really powerful ideas, and I need to learn more about what he teaches and what he knows. But I can tell you that just by working with him and communicating with him, he's been very empowering to me. Even, sometimes it's not what you say, it's who you are. And he's one of these guys that when he just talks about what he's passionate about, my mind starts to open up and I start to see possibilities. He has that kind of power. And there's not a lot of people that can do that. So I'm looking forward to getting to know him better and to getting to know what it is that he teaches. And he's been very gracious and very supportive of me and my channel. And so anyway, yeah, I've in the beginning there, and I'll replay it, I've got the links to his website and to his YouTube channel. But in any case, this will be interesting because I'll see, again, each time that you take a copy and then replay it through this and stream it, you lose a lot of quality. So we'll see how this turns out. But so that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And again, I'm going to be here like you. I don't remember what the hell we talked about or what I said. And so it'll be interesting for me to kind of have your experience of what it's like to listen to me. And as I said, as we go on, we will take questions from, you guys can type in questions, and I'll do my best to answer the questions. If it's something that Seth has said, I may or may not be able to answer it, but I can give you certainly my take on it. In any case, let's go ahead and get started with this. Actually, before I do that, I want to share with you guys, I'm so happy about where I'm living, and I think there was something that I said to Sethikus yesterday, and I want to show you when I get to it what I was talking about. As some of you know, I've gone through some life changes here recently. My fiance has left this physical plane and gone on to another plane, and so I'm enjoying watching how that relationship is changing. I'm still in love with her as much as I ever have been, but it's reminding me of what how our ancestors used to worship. By the way, ancestor worship is central to shamanism, and I'm learning that there's a lot more to it than just revering your ancestors. By the way, that's why we keep family photos over the mantelpiece of the fireplace. One of the original names for fireplace is Ingle Nook, the Nook of Ing. Ing is the god of sacred fire. The Vedics called him Agni. And so he was the god who burned up the sacrifices and sent the smoke to the gods. He was the one through which, the fire through which that purified your offerings to the gods. And so we would also worship our ancestors with this. And this is why, to this day, we put the pictures of our ancestors, our grandparents, our mothers, our fathers, and people who have passed. We put them on the mantelpiece because we are worshiping and venerating the ancestors. But what I'm finding about that is that it's something that you can give back. I've never felt like this. Obviously, she was my soulmate. I've never felt like this about anybody. But my love for her is so intense that now what I want to do is I want to empower her on her way, wherever that is, whatever she's doing. And so I have begun seeing her and I didn't choose to do this, but when I go out and I look in the sunset at night, and I see her everywhere. I see her in the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen. So I want to show you what it is that I'm enjoying here on a pretty much a daily basis in my new place. But what I'm doing when I'm looking up at those amazing colors is I'm feeling her in that, and I'm communicating to her and talking to her. And it's really bringing an awareness of what it means to worship the ancestors. Because what you're doing is you're actually seeing them in their perfect form, because that's what we remember. We remember what's best about the people that we love. And when we focus on what was best about them, what was perfect about them, they can actually take that on. We are actually helping them to move to the next level of their awareness. This is what ancestor worship is all about, at least for me in this instance. But this is what I get to enjoy every day. Yeah, so again, some of the quality is lost. I can see, after it's, replayed and restreamed and all that, and who knows how it looks on your computer or your device. But anyway, it's one of the most amazing things. So anyway, the point is that these are some of the things that Seth and I start to talk about. And again, he asks me some questions, and I don't remember what I said. So I'm going to go ahead. I guess before I do anything, I'll go ahead and see if there are any questions about anything before we get into this, just to see if there's people on. We got 24 people watching here. Can you recommend good books? Dovidas Milcha says, yes, all of my books. You can go to michaelwilliamdenney.com. Denney is spelled D-E-N-N-E-Y. Go to michaelwilliamdenney.com, and that will bring up all of my books. Those are the books that I recommend. Okay, yeah, and Ben Real says, glad you're bouncing back, bro. Yeah, I am. I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling so much better. I've got my strength back. For a while, I was so fatigued. I mean, oh my God, I've never felt that fatigue in my entire life. But I'm feeling my strength back, and I just got back from surfing a little while ago. Anyway, yeah, life is pretty damn good, I have to say. Okay, so let us go ahead, and I'll get started with the interview. And like I said, every few minutes I'll stop and I'll take any questions or comment if there's something that he or I have said that has got me moving. Let's hope that this works. So anyway, I'm going to give it a try here.
All right, this is Sethikus Boza with Black Earth Productions and the Blue Flame Healing Arts and Occult Science. And tonight I have a very awesome segment lined out, getting into the ancient tradition of our ancestors, getting into the Nordic tradition, getting into the shamanic tradition, the ancient codes that are activating now in 2017. And tonight I have as a guest, Michael Denney, the Thunder Wizard, who has joined me for this segment. And Michael, I want to thank you for coming on tonight and doing this with me, man. How you
My
doing tonight?
absolute privilege. Complete privilege, my friend. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, the first thing that I had in mind to get into tonight was the whole concept of Seth and Golder. Because Seth and Golder is something I feel that I've personally experienced, something that I'm directly connected to via my bloodline lineage. And I've been listening to your videos, man. And one thing that really stood out to me is that the tradition of our ancestors it's unbroken. It's an unbroken tradition that I personally have been able to trace back at least 40,000 to 300,000 years. This is pre-Christian. This is even cataclysm when it comes to a lot of the things that I've been able to get into as far as the videos I've presented. But tonight, I'd really like it if you would be able to unpack the essence of Seth, getting into the essence of Golder and what that actually is. And we could start there, man, if you just want to dive.
Yeah, cool. That's a great topic. And what I really appreciated about the way you introduced that was the idea of an unbroken connection. And I use that word a lot. Anybody who's read my books or heard me talk, I'll say, I emphasize that what I am interested in and what I think is essential is to get back to practices and traditions that have an unbroken connection into prehistory. And I really love the way that you pointed out, not prehistory isn't just, a couple thousand years. We're talking hundreds of thousands of years. And I guess let me start with something that I've talked about a lot. I haven't talked about it recently, but this was something that really exploded within me when I started on this particular phase of my path, which is before I knew that I wanted to really awaken the path of my immediate ethnic ancestors, I was always into looking for the roots of all this stuff. And here's the thing: if energy is real, if these spiritual traditions are real, if the gods are real, then we're talking about a science. This isn't something that's up for arbitrary interpretation. It's not just something we throw together to make ourselves feel good. This is a science to it. And so that means it's going to trace itself back to the first human beings. And interestingly enough, the word man that we use for talking about humans, now it means human male, but originally in the ancient Germanic, man meant human being. So it didn't matter if we were talking about men or women, it was man, and man means mind. And so, and the moon, it's the same word for the moon, and the moon is always representative of the mind. It reflects the light of the spirit, the light of the sun. And so when our ancient ancestors talked about human beings, they called us man, which meant that we weren't these things, we weren't this, we were the reflection on earth of the divine mind, however you want to look at that. And that's true in the Sanskrit as well, in the ancient Vedic tradition. They, called the first human being, and my Sanskrit's a little off today, but Manus, I believe. Manas means mind. And the first human in the Germanic tradition was named Manuj. So we're talking about the same ancient tradition. The word for the god of what we now see as the god of warfare or victory, his name is Tyr in the Norse, but his name was Tiwaj in the original Germanic. We still have it in the day of Tuesday, the day of Tew. Now we see him as a god of war now, but originally if you take that root word, it goes back to divine. And you see it in just the word for divine, divine. You look at the ancient Vedic god of the sky. His name was Dyeus Pita, sky father. And now we're starting to sound like what people start throwing around when they talk about shamanism. They talk about the Sky Father and the Earth Mother. So we're finding that our ancestors had this same understanding. And so either that's something that's passed down in between different cultures, which I don't think is the case, or we're talking about a science of connecting. You know, back then spirituality and science weren't different. You know, there's not physical science and spiritual sciences, there was just science. And so a wizard is a guy who would know both of those things. But anyway, getting back to that. So what's interesting for me and what blew my mind is that that root for the Sky Father of D or T is the exact same root for the celestial emperor who lives in the North Star in the Chinese tradition. And it's an ancient way of talking about a deity for them. So like the deity of Quan Ti, they'll put the T on the end of it, which will mean that same idea of this divine essence. So the Chinese language and the Germanic languages and the Vedic languages are completely different linguistic branches. They're not related to each other in the recent, and by recent I mean by tens of thousands of years. So if we've got people who are separated by tens of thousands of years and their language is very different, and they're using the same root word, identical same root word for the essence of the divine Sky Father, then we're talking, if we keep going back further and further in time, we're going to get to the first group of human beings. And for those people who are interested, I am. I love archaeology and the history of the human race. There was a time when human beings almost went extinct. This is when we had all different kinds of bipedal hominids. You know, there's Bigfoots walking around and all kinds of weird looking two-legged, you know, things walking around. And they became so so successful in their particular niche that then when the climate would change, they would go extinct. Human beings were the only ones that were smart enough and were flexible enough to change. And it was almost, according to what we know, the population of human beings was so small that it was almost impossible for us to survive, but we did. So we're talking about those are the first people who brought that science. And here's another thing about science. Science only means something if it has to do with our survival. So when we get into these big philosophical discussions about the nature of this and the nature of that, sometimes you have to ask yourself, does this help me survive? And that's when we get into the arbitrary stuff. But those people back then, you know that their survival depended on not only being able to connect on a physical level, but they better well be able to connect on a spiritual level. Otherwise, they weren't going to survive. So when we look at this, that when I call out to the God of the Sky Father, Tu, when I call out to him, I'm calling out to that same essence, that same being, that those first humans were calling out to 100,000, 200,000 years ago. And so that's when you talk like that, when you talk about going back to the ancient unbroken tradition, that gets me really fired up, because that's what I hear when I hear you talking about that. So it really turns me on when you say that. But it's incredibly important, I think, to connect to that, because what we've done in the past 2,000 years especially is we have been disconnected from that need to connect to a spiritual science. And I could get into all the reasons why I think that happened, but then we started having to create our own kinds of understandings. And I think that's one of the problems that's happened in the past 2,000 years. So when I use the word unbroken connection, it doesn't mean that I don't honor and accept things that have come up that are new. But I want to look at that and see, is this just people arbitrarily trying to figure something out and throwing things in there? Or are they following some scientific spiritual path? And so I think, even though a lot of our ancient European traditions have been lost due to Christianity coming in, we still have connections to those deities, to those energies. And I'm not the only person. I know a lot of people have connected with me I think you can relate to this as well, is that when you start connecting to them, you find that they are telling us the same things. You know, and I'll give you an example of this is an apprentice of mine, a female apprentice, who I believe has a lot more power than I do when it comes to what we're going to talk about, which is seed. And she was talking about her experience. I hope she's okay. I'm sure she's probably going to hear this. I won't mention her name, but she was talking about her experience with the god Balder. And she explained some things in her vision that she could not have known by herself. And she even said, this was before I even read the myths about him. But one of the things she said about him was that he was a big burly man with red hair and a red beard. And I had never imagined him that way. I had imagined him the typical, you know, we want to think of him as a Norse deity, so we give him blonde hair and blue eyes, and maybe he's kind of skinny, looks like a surfer or something. I don't know. You know, he's the sun god, so we think of him as being, you know, but he wasn't. He was big and burly with red hair. And then it made sense to me, of course, he's a sun god. And what is the element of the sun but fire? So of course he's going to have red hair. It's the same with Thor, by the way. Thor has red hair and a red beard. And people have used that to say, well, you see, that's why Thor is only for white people, because only white people have red hair. But what's interesting is that the Chinese thunder gods have red hair. So it's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with, these are deities that are representing whatever element they're working with. And now we're talking about a science, because now it makes sense. It's following, you know, practical, observable rules that you can see. And so when you've got 3 or 4 different people who don't know each other and aren't connected, and they're having the same experiences, now we're starting to tap into something real. And it's again, it's a science as opposed to just an idea. So anyway, that's my thoughts about that phrase of an unbroken connection. And that is why I'm a syncretist, because I am, if we live in a culture where we have chosen over the past 2,000 years to discard our ancient understandings, then we're going to have to find people who haven't. And, you know, the Chinese are one, the Vedics are another, you know, we could go on and on. But when we start...
I think that you and I are 2 individuals that are definitely tapped.
Okay, so I want to give him space to have his opinion a little bit. I don't want to step on that right now. Okay, so, boy, wind me up and watch me go. Huh? It's kind of hard to shut me up once I get talking there. Holy crap. All right, so, let's see here. I'm going to see if there's any questions here. Black Earth Productions is on. Good. I hope you're cool with me putting this on so soon. But anyway, yeah, I will continue to give out links to your websites and everything. Let's see. Question. Emerson's Coffee, Bike, and Rum Shop. How many strands of DNA do we have, and does it even matter? I refer to the idea we have 12 strands of DNA. I don't have an answer for that. Black Earth Productions says 12 strands is just the beginning. Emerson's Coffee says, every time I chant and do Qigong, I feel I activate another piece and learn things I have never been exposed to. So, yeah, I'll wait. Maybe that'll be a question I can ask him when I interview him. Assuming he'll let me interview him. But another way to look at it is that these may be dormant things within your DNA that are being activated. So, you know, you have, you know, and we know this, science already knows this, that we have dormant DNA all over the place. And, you know, some DNA is latent and probably is, you know, outmoded and we don't need it. But what about, you know, when you do Qigong or when you tap into the ancestors, this was my experience on both of these things, that it felt like latent DNA was being stimulated and awoken. So that's my thought about that. Okay, so let's see here. See if there's any more questions. Again, that's what I really love. I want to answer questions. That's what I'm here to do. Okay, so let's see here. Ben Real says, oh wait, Cosmo Joe. Cosmo Joe, always make sure I see. I almost didn't see your question there. So write question or put a question mark. Otherwise, I pass it up because I'm going to get to the questions. Astral projection, what is your methods? Cosmo Joe, watch my videos. I would recommend getting started with Qigong. I'd have to probably do a whole thing on astral projection and my thoughts about that. But you know, I do some videos, some introductory videos into shamanic journeying. So go on my channel and look for that. Ben Real, what if you're disconnected from your ancestry because of slavery? You know, you're not disconnected from your ancestry. You may not consciously know. For example, I thought I was Celtic. I'm sure I have some Celtic blood in me because most people from England do. My ancestors, you know, I can trace them back to England, and then before that to the Vikings. But I always thought that I was Celtic, and so because my last name Denney sounds Celtic, because my dad somewhere got the feeling that he was Welsh or Irish because it sounds that way. I tried doing Celtic shamanism way back in the early 90s, and the Celtic gods looked at me funny. When I would bring them up and deal with them, they'd look at me like, who the hell are you? And so I kind of just figured, well, maybe this stuff doesn't work. It wasn't until I started reading the Norse myths and then did some shamanic journeys, and I was told, and you know, I share this in the book, The Thunder Wizard Path, that I'm actually descended from Germanic people, Vikings and continental Germanic people. And I did not want to hear that. I associated Germanic people with Nazis and racism, and I wanted nothing to do with that, and I wanted nothing. I did not want to be a part of that. I bought into the whole idea of being Celtic, and then I bought into the whole idea of us poor Celtic victims, and those barbarian German people came onto our island and blah, blah, blah. So it was really hard for me to face that. But then when I did some research, I found out that whole history is nonsense. It didn't happen that way at all. I've talked about that in some other videos. But just because you feel disconnected or because you don't consciously know who you are, you can connect. If you do some research, and all you have to do is just ask. Go into shamanic journey and ask where you're from. They'll tell you. You may not understand it at first. You may need to ask around. It may take some time. I had to get out some maps because what I was shown was a map of, I mean, you know, from the sky, not a map, but I was seeing a coastline, and I was like, where the hell is that? And I had to do some research, and sure enough, it was right on the coast there of Germany and the Netherlands and all that. That's where I came from. So, you know, that's what I would recommend doing. Follow your instincts. If you have a strong desire for a certain ethnic practice, go play around with it, because even though it may not look like that's who you are, there may be other things. There might be past life stuff. Anyway, well, I think we talk about that together. So anyway, don't get wrapped up in who or what you think you are. You know, I've got people working with me, more than a handful, who if you were to look at them on the street, you would have no idea that they were of Germanic heritage. Let's see, it looks like my thing stopped here. What happened? I don't know if we're still on here. Let me take a look and see my, okay, it's going anyway. So yeah, streaming seems to be a little choppy, so just be, anyway. Bottom line is just follow your instincts and don't worry about your skin color or your eye color or your hair color. Follow what your instincts are telling you. You're going to find something out. You're going to find out something interesting. So follow your instincts. Okay, let's see here. All right, so again, looking for the questions here. And again, we got Black Earth Productions on here, so he can answer some questions about his understanding of things as we're going as well. So, let's see here. Could you speak more on what happened between the Celts and the Germanic tribes? I don't understand the question. I don't know, you know, at what point in history are we talking about? You know, and I don't know why you need to know that. I'm not sure why you need to know that. What I can tell you is this, is that this is an interesting thing. People, especially people who are racialists, want to throw in the Celts and the Germanics as one ethnic people. And the truth is, if you look at somebody who's purely Celtic and then take somebody who's purely Norwegian, right? And if you look at their DNA, of course, you're going to find some similarities, but you're going to find a lot of differences. And one of the interesting things is that the greatest diversity of ethnicity is in Africa. So you take two Africans, put them together, and because, you know, we like to go on surface things, they go, oh, they both have curly hair and black skin, well, they must be closely related. And you'll find out that they are less related to each other than we are to them. The greatest ethnic diversity is in Africa, and they're all black skinned. It's got nothing to do with skin color. So, you know, Celtics and Germanic peoples were at one time probably around 50 or 60,000 years ago, part of the same initial wave of what we would now call Indo-European, the original Indo-European migrants into the northern hemisphere from Africa. And then you have the ice ages that come in, and big, huge, giant continents of ice break these people apart. And they're separated by tens of thousands of years. And you have one people that were stuck on what is now Spain, and they went around and they traveled around over to the other side, to the eastern side of what is now the British Isles, and that's when they populated there, and then they moved east. So the Celtic tribes that were continental actually came around and moved east after the ice ages melted. And on the other side of the Pyrenees Mountains, there was a little area there, and that's where the people who became the Germanics were for tens of thousands of years. And as the ice melted, they moved up north into Scandinavia and all that. So there's tens of thousands of years between the Germanics and the Celts. And, you know, they have some similarities, but they have so many differences. So this is, you know, this is the kind of stuff we have to start thinking outside of the box when we start thinking about what real ethnicity is. So that explains why when I have green eyes and dark hair and, you know, I look like your typical Irish American, I went and I started worshiping the Celtic gods, and they looked at me like, who the hell are you? We don't know who you are. They were nice to me. They gave me a lot of gifts, but they didn't recognize me. So anyway. So that just goes to show you. Anyway, we could talk about that for a long time. All right, so let's continue here, and I'll look for some questions, and then I'll get back to the interview there. How does one find out what their soul genetic codes are? Genealogy is a great way to do it. You can do that, but again, I would say first thing is follow your instincts, follow what you like, follow what speaks to you, do some shamanic journeys, and ask. They'll tell you. Okay. Let's see here. Let's see here. Okay, so no more questions. All right, so let's move on here. Let's get back into the... okay, again, is humanity an experiment? No. Humanity is not an experiment. We're going to talk about that. During transcendental meditation, my thoughts stopped. Third eye became liquid light. A wind flowed through my room, and I expanded into something blissful and non-human. Sounds great. So, I mean, I guess there is some value to the idea of what does that mean by experiment, but I thought what you meant by that is, are human beings some alien experiment? And no, we're not. We're not some mistake. Okay. During shamanic journey, how do we know the difference between our subconscious and benevolent beings contacting us? That comes through practice. So you may not know in the beginning. The thing to do is when you have a shamanic vision or a journey, when you come out of it, write everything down. Don't take anything too seriously. Assume that it may not be true, and then go and try and find ways to corroborate it. When you are able to corroborate things in this reality that back up what you experienced in a vision, that means it was real. If you can't, it doesn't mean it's not real, but it may mean that it was your own, perhaps your own unconscious, and I would use the word unconscious, not subconscious. It is perhaps your unconscious narcissism and fear or fantasy, which is what dreams are. So anyway. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to get back to. First, I'm going to do the thing here so you can see links for me and links for Sethikus and where you can reach us. And then I'll get back to the interview. Let's see if I click on the right thing here.
Into this sort of thing. For me personally, in the context of what you're talking about, man, this all goes back to the ancient wisdom councils that were once present on the planet before all the fucking bullshit unfolded, man. And this is tracing what we're talking about in context, back 40,000 to 300,000 years. This honestly, man, goes back millions of years. Okay? And these are codes within me that start to activate. You're talking about one of your students or an apprentice having an experience even before they started doing research for reference. And that's the difference when it comes to what I say I have personally experienced when it comes to this. When it comes to a lot of the things I talk about, I was having these experiences early on in life, and I had no idea even what was going on, because of how I was raised. And, we were talking about it before we started recording this segment, but both you and I have been involved in the religion of Christianity directly, not to, rabbit trail into that. But even before I got involved, there was an experience I went through, a true shamanic initiation, man. And I literally went mentally insane for over a year. And I'm having to go into the ancient trauma and all this stuff that happened in the bloodline, and facing it. It's all coming up in my consciousness, but my psyche couldn't handle it, man.
Yeah.
And this is upon getting into this even more, getting into Sade specifically, I was going through those very real shamanic initiations, having interface with spirits and dimensions and consciousness, but it was very dark, man. It was very evil, I'll say, at the time. But once I got through a certain phase, I made that connection back to what I know within myself was the real, and it's been guiding me ever since. Even though I have had to deal with programming and stuff, healing through these grid works and all these different astral layers that people are dealing with. So that's very interesting, man, what you're talking about. And for me personally, as far as what has been revealed to me with my bloodline lineage, and which is directly connected to the Nordic tradition, to the Sade and the Galder, getting back to the original, man.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, as mankind, we're completely fucked, because there's a transhuman timeline that is playing itself out, and they're starting to roll out all this kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So right now in 2017, what's been revealed to me is that the dark ones are done completely and totally. All this manipulation, all of this inversion of traditions, all this twisting of you know, you're talking about science, and it's not even real science nowadays, man. It's just scientism, because they've taken the spirit out of it. And to really know what's going on, you got to dive into the occult, man. You got to dive into metaphysics, and this is getting into the magic of the ancestors, the magic that the vulva, you know, experienced when they were having, you know, these save activations, and then of course the Golder, you know, as well, being able to interpret these experiences. You know, we were talking before. With dreams and visions and stuff like that, and so I relate personally to both. But where does one actually start to experience this, man? Do you feel that it's a direct bloodline lineage thing, personally with individuals, or can anybody just jump into it and think that they're going to experience this sort of thing? Because it's all across the board with every ancient tradition out there. You're talking about these similarities, even the words and the things that are being used. So if maybe you could dive into this now and
that's a great question, and it's a multifaceted question, and it can be confusing, obviously, because there's some very strong ideas about this kind of thing. So I think that there are multiple levels to it. There is, without a doubt, a genetic DNA connection that when you start to work with the deities and the powers of your ethnic background, things are awakened within you. But I also believe that there are past life connections that somebody can have. And so just to back up a little bit, I'll give you what I think one of the ideas of why things are changing. I love the way you put it, that the dark powers have lost their control over things. And from the Vedic perspective, the different yugas, we just came out of what's called Kali Yuga, which means the age of darkness. And so according to that understanding, you have the center of the galaxy or the universe, I don't know which, and that is where the center of spirituality is, or the essence, or whatever you want to look at. And so our galaxy will revolve around it in an elliptical fashion. And so the Kali Yuga is when we're the furthest away. And according to that, it means that only 25% of people will be able to connect to the spiritual realms, and 75% of human beings are going to be lost in darkness, which is, we could go into what that is. But we've come through that. When we hit the age of enlightenment, we actually came out of Kali Yuga, and we've been making our way into what's called Dvapara Yuga, which means half and half. And we're going to go from 25% to 50%, and that's why you see this huge divide in politics, in economics, in everything. It's people are moving, and then you've got people who are completely awakening, people who aren't. But if you look at it from a graph perspective, like if Kali Yuga is here and the golden age is here, we were coming around this way, right? And this would have been around 2,000 years ago, when we were still connected to the gods, and then we gave it up for monotheism. And now we're coming back around this way, and guess what? We're lined up with that same time period. We're just on the other side of the revolution there. And so that's why all the gods are coming back. And that's why people are starting to awaken within them. It's almost like, that it's reverberating back through, and we just look straight at it now. But it's going to be more evolved. So that's why I believe that people like myself I'm looking to the old ways, but I'm also inventing and allowing new understandings to come into that. But let's get back to your question of seed. So I got to tell you, I know what I know, and I'm good at what I can do. I'm definitely not the ultimate master of any of this stuff. There are people, my students especially, some of them will tell me, I listen to their experiences, because they have more abilities than I do in some areas. Seed is one of those places. Seed is, what we want to call shamanism now is what our ancestors called seed, and it means to boil. And for those who have done the Hool breath, which if you go on my channel, the Huul breath, one of the first things that you experience when you connect deep under the earth is that the waters underneath start to bubble and boil. And I didn't know that. Before I knew what was any of this stuff meant, I didn't know what was going on. It was just, that was really interesting. And for me, it was like this steam that was rising up from the earth as I'm doing this particular breath, which happens to be the name of the Earth Mother Goddess. And so that to me is what I understand seethe to be. You're literally seething. So we have people who, we split it up. I use the two understandings as I understand it, which seethe would be what we would call shamanism, which is to go and either through vision or through sacred, God possession, being able to channel the deities and speak directly from the deities. And then there's Galder. And Galder means to chant. In English we say yell, but they said Galder, yell, Galder, it's the same word. So that represents what we would think of as the wizard, the person who sits there with the potions and the spells and the this and the that. What I would use science. This is why I like the word science. You face this direction, you use this element, whatever it is. That to me is a science. And when you do that, it opens up different portals and all kinds of things happen. So that's the wizard. So what will happen when you've got the shaman who is going places that the wizard can't necessarily go? But in order to go there, you have to not have as much discrimination. Because if you think about it too much, then you can't just let yourself go there. So shamans tend to have the ability to go and experience things. And when they come back with stuff, they don't know what to do with it. And so this is what Galder is for. This is what the wizard is for. The wizard, and I do this with, again, those students that I mentioned. I love listening to them tell me about where they went. And like I shared with one, there was no way she could have known those things. I'll give you another detail, is that she knew she was getting pulled down. I don't know exactly, again, I don't want to speak for her, but somebody had given her a torch, and when that happens, she knows she's going down into the underworld. And what she saw when she was there was what she saw. She saw a ship that was burned out and sort of on its side. So she just threw that out as a detail, but I immediately knew, oh, this is somebody of royal bearing who was put on a funerary ship, and the ship was sunk. They shoot fire arrows into it, and it burns and it sinks. So I knew exactly where, and so she may not have known that. And then knowing that he's got a red beard, she may not have known what that meant. The wizard knows how to put all that stuff together. So this is how seethe and Galder can work together. Having said that, I don't want to give the impression that I'm telling, exactly all of the details, because there's a lot to it, and I've learned maybe this much of it. But it's this is how, generally speaking, we're talking about masculine and feminine, and of course that can be. We're not talking about gender here. We're talking about quality of energy here. So the masculine and feminine is like that, and we see that in the Vedic tradition with the sacred scriptures where Shiva is teaching Shakti. But in those scriptures, what's happening is Shakti will ask Shiva about herself, and then he will explain it to her, all the while saying that she is more powerful than he is. But he has to explain to her so she can understand what her nature is. And so this is what happens when you have seethe and Galder put together. And that's why it's so tragic, is the word that's coming to my mind, but it can be so difficult for people who are called to be seethe shamans if they don't have anybody else to connect to, if they don't have a wizard or a teacher or somebody who can be there with them, because it does, you get torn apart. Yeah. Your spirit gets pulled apart and changed, and you don't have any idea what the hell's happening to you, and there's nobody there to just kind of be an anchor and say, no, here's what's happening. To go, oh, okay, it is okay that I'm exchanging and I'm expanding into a completely new being. So that's one of the tragedies that we've lost, because, in ancient times, you always had that. And, just for a second, I want to talk about the feminine, the power of the feminine. We have culturally forgotten how powerful the feminine is, except with the patriarchal abuse towards women. And that is an unconscious acknowledgement that women have more power than men when it comes to spirit. And that in ancient times, in here, let me explain a little further. This is something I haven't seen in any other tradition but the Nordic tradition. You have what's called the staff carrier women, what we call the vulva. And normally staves we see are connected with male leaders. They'll hold the staff, which has, the phallic symbol is very obvious. They're holding the power of the male, the authority, all that. But in our ancestral tradition, it was the women who carried the staff. And the ancient, I'm forgetting the name of the myth, the Voluspa. Vulvas had the power when they would walk through a village and they would travel around. Once you got past a certain age and you were a woman shamanist, you would travel around all over the place, doing your work. And when you came into town, everybody got out of your way. And if one walked up to your door, you let her in. You built a feast for her. She was the one that had all the power here, so even more than the men. But what I find interesting is that our ancestors, which is so diametrically opposed to where we are at in our society today, is they understood that women had power to such an extent they let the women carry the man's power. That they understood that a truly powerful man is a man who has allowed himself to be empowered by the feminine. And an interesting little side note that I found just by watching some documentary about the Roman invasion of Europe is that when the Roman armies were making their way to Germania, to conquer Germania, the women shamans told the warriors, don't fight them yet. Wait until we tell you. And they were like they were looking at each other across the battlefield. And the Germanic warriors decided, forget that, we're just going to go. And the rest is history. Our society would be completely different had it gone another way. We might be similar to India, where we would be carrying, the knowledge of our polytheist ancestors. So when it comes to the power of seed, and I think you're experiencing this and feeling this, is that this is something that without a proper understanding and respect, all you get is chaos. The whole world crumbles in on itself. And in my tradition of the spirit fighting, which is a Taoist tradition, I'm going to sort of break some protocol here, but I'm going to show you one of the original hand postures. You've got the male here, and you've got the female here. If you look at it from the side, right, this is the feminine hand. So the feminine hand is like this, but they have to be together. Without the feminine hand, what happens to the male? Loses all of its power. Without the power of the male, the feminine goes like this. And this is chaos. And this is what we don't understand, is what's happened is when the masculine tries to destroy the female, it loses all of its power. And then what ends up happening is you just have Shakti running around. That's why we had in our ancestral fairy tales, you have the wicked witch. You don't have the wicked wizard. You have the wicked witch. That's who you got to be careful of. Because when the power of the feminine is taken away or driven away from the masculine, which roots it and keeps it focused, it just becomes pure chaos.
Right.
And that's where we're living today. We have nuclear bombs.
Right. And that's the major issue all across the board. And the feminine has been the most targeted because of everything that you're saying. This is getting into the Saturn cults now, the black cube cults, Judaism, Islam, Christianity. Yeah. This inversion of the feminine force, and Saturn literally represents the feminine force. It's the feminine force, the material realm, and also the bridge points, being able to connect to what we're talking about. But without that balance, like you're talking about, both don't operate correctly. And now you got these agendas where it's like women turning into men and men turning into women. You know what I'm saying? You know, and then that's a big long discussion. I don't really want to get into that, but it's all a part of the chaos magic. You're talking about the feminine force being in chaos. You know what I'm saying? And also the fact that there's not enough men that know the difference with any of this, which is the major cause point. I would say on an unconscious level,
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
society. And so getting back to our roots, getting back to the ancient roots now is so important. You're talking about the cycle that the cycles that we've been in, and I've said it, you know, even with the videos that I presented, that we've reached the end of the great year, the 26,000 year cycle, and now we're coming back around to that trajectory that you were talking about, man. You're saying it the same way, but in a different way. And see, these are puzzle pieces that we're all, you know, picking up on, and we're weaving this cosmic tapestry back together again. And the things that are unfolding now, the things that are happening with other people on the network with, man, these are individuals that are at the forefront with what they practice and what they're doing. And I see what is happening now, even in this conversation. This is going to go out, and this is going to expand even more, man. But yeah, the Sade and the Golder, I could say that I've experienced both. Now, when it comes to union, I'll say with masculine and feminine, that trajectory that you're talking about is something that we have not seen for a very, very long time in this reality field, man. And that's why all of this fucking shit is going on right now, because it's all these old programs that are still playing out, while at the same time these things are being activated within individuals, and they don't even know what is going on. You're talking about an individual that would be, you know, going through that Sade experience, that boiling, you know, and all this stuff is coming up, and they feel like they're going insane, or they are going into that, you know what I'm saying? And we need more people that understand these sciences like you're talking about, that could catch this, because it's all about catching it. And it's also to recognize and tell people that there's nothing wrong with them.
Right.
You know, we've been conditioned to think that something's wrong with us if we're feeling all of these dark, negative emotions. And that's the other thing too. We've been conditioned to have a negative relationship with emotion itself.
Yeah.
When emotion is simply energy in motion, and you got to stir that pot, you got to get it, you know, stirred up. And that's what I would say the higher force is doing, and is what people are going to experience. You said 25% going to 50%. And that's beautiful, man, because I would say on the solar eclipse, I want to touch on this real quick, man. Rahu, right? The solar eclipse in Rahu, we got our timeline, man. And I made a video about this. Other people have confirmed this. But there was a line drawn in the sun, and we said no more on higher realms. And now it's starting to manifest, man.
Yeah.
Now people are starting to feel it. I think right now we're in a well, Neptune just went direct, so that there's a major wrunging going on right now, just the squeezing out of all of this old programming, and people are gonna have the opportunity, man, that they haven't had for hundreds of thousands of years, as far as I'm concerned. We're coming into a time unlike any other time, a new renaissance, so to speak, if we catch it, man. And it's all about catching it and being the shamans that we're meant to be. And I know you are, man. All the work that you presented, brilliant, man. Your channel, I mean, I haven't gone through everything, you know what I'm saying? But everything I've gone through, it's just like it's igniting these codes within me, man. And so I want to dive, you know, even deeper into this. You know, talk a little bit more about the Golder, talking about the
Okay, so I wanted to take a break there before we moved into, you know, who knows what I'm going to launch into. I just know that once I get started, it's hard to shut me up. So I wanted to stop right there. There were some things that he said that I think I want to touch on. And I'm going to give my take on some things that he was just saying in passing, which I think I might be on the same wavelength as him. But he mentioned a couple times that what's important is you got to catch it. And he talked about, which I want to ask him more about what he understands about the trans-dimensional timeline. But let's talk about timelines for a minute. I've been asked numerous times, is the timeline shifting? Is the timeline changing? And my response is always the same, that timelines are continuously changing. This is what we need to understand. It's helpful to have these benchmarks like we did with the eclipse, and I completely agree with what he said. I did those 2 videos on the eclipse, and I got to be honest with you, I did not know what was going to happen. I had some predictions based on some vague understandings of what happens when you have an eclipse in Leo, with Rahu in Leo and all those kinds of things. And it certainly had a huge effect on me once the eclipse came through, because my my ascendant is in Leo as well. It means Rahu went right over my ascendant. Sure enough, I had huge transformations, the ones I've already shared about. Big one, the loss of my fiance. But also what he said is also true, and we're seeing it everywhere. And I'll just give you one example. We could look at politics, and we could talk about how that's being upended. And it doesn't matter which side of the political aisle you're on. We're both saying, yeah, let's upend the thing. Let's tip the thing over and upend it. But you're seeing it even when it comes to the Hollywood elite. All of the sexual allegations, the sexual abuse allegations that are coming out. And they're just coming out one after another, after another, after another. And there's just this avalanche. And like Sethikus said, is that that there's been some decision made on higher levels that said, that's it, no more. One of the things that Rahu does, the north node of the moon, is that he reveals what's been secret. So the stuff you're not supposed to know, or nobody will let you know, he's going to bring it out. And he does it in a way when it happens, Rahu went over the United States. The eclipse went directly over the continental United States. Even people that you would never expect, the big movie star, what the heck is the guy's name? Anyway, the one that's all of a sudden we find out he's this huge sexual abuser. And then we have this guy in, a Democratic senator, who we think of as being really progressive, and we find out he's got at least a couple of people that are saying, so it's all across the board that all of your secrets are going to be shown. And it is an opportunity to change timelines. It's a huge opportunity to make the shift. But what I want you to understand is that there is always that moment in every second. You can change your timeline. Every single second you are making choices. You are having feelings, you are having reactions. This is why I tell people not to be wrapped up in victim mentality on any level. I'm not saying don't have your feelings. I mean, I was out surfing today. That's why I go surfing, because all my crap comes up, and I just let myself have it out, and the ocean takes it away from me, and then I get to feel better. But it's when you hold on to things and you make commitments inside of yourself, and then you keep reinforcing any kind of negative fear-based stuff, that's when you create your own little timeline. That will create more negativity. And one of the things that Sethikus has done for me just by connecting with him is that he keeps hammering away at this idea that we are coming into a space of potential that we haven't been in for, as he says, hundreds of thousands of years. And that in and of itself puts me in a different frame of mind to start thinking about my limitations and to blow those wide open, which creates new timelines for me to walk down. So, the thing about timelines is that according to physics, again, physics says that whatever you can imagine has to exist in an alternate timeline. Whatever the most incredible, wonderful, beautiful world, if you can imagine it, it exists. When the worst one also exists. And there's infinite numbers of timelines continuously playing themselves out, and it's like branches in front of you. You know, this is one of the things that the tree of life is about. There's branches in front of you. And every single nanosecond, you are jumping onto a new branch, which goes down and continues to branch out. And you can always change timelines. And the way you change timelines is you change your attitudes. That's why I tell you to don't have any, don't buy into any of the fear. I know it's fun to be a victim. I know it's fun to feel like you're the 1% who knows what's really going on, and all the people are out in the chemtrails and whatever the hell it is that your thing is. But the more that you buy into that, and the more that you make that a definition of who you are, you're creating a timeline. I'm not saying that these things don't exist. I'm just saying you don't have to make that your identity. If you make your identity the other side of it, that you're infinite, that you are infinitely powerful, that is the timeline you can continue to create in every single moment. So that's what happens when I listen to Sethikus talk. He gets me on that level. His vibe gets me onto an even greater awareness of my timeline and what I want to create. It's one of the reasons I really appreciate it. Okay, so let me see if there are any questions here. My friend died for minutes and was being cut by spirits. Was this a call to be a shaman? I'd have to talk to him. But yes, that is a typical shamanic initiation. It means that your limitations are being destroyed and you're being put back together. When shamans, this is a typical thing, shamans will die, they'll be sick, they'll have an experience where they die, and then the spirits cut them into pieces and put them back together. And then when they come back to life, they have powers they didn't have. That's how it works. Let's see. Let's see. Do you think Susie Yotun's wife, do you think the gods are at war? So Susie Yotun's wife, am I wrong in assuming you have not worked with me, right? I mean, we haven't talked on the phone. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, I don't know what you mean by are the gods at war. Are you thinking, is there a literal war where the gods are trying to destroy themselves? That sounds kind of negative and fear-based to me. The warfare among the gods is an understanding of the difference. We live in a dynamic cosmos. This is what shamanism is. Shamanism is finding the balance, a dynamic balance. We don't get to a static state of everything is perfect and everything is okay. That's why I never teach people to, don't deal with your negative feelings. I tell you not to buy into fear, but I never tell people to not have their feelings. In fact, I tell people you've got to have your feelings. You've got to be in the moment and feel all of your feelings. If you could have seen some of the stuff I went through, during this past month, I mean, weeping and crying like an infant, because I know that if I don't get that out, if I don't feel that, that I could have made myself sick. And here I am now feeling much better because I spent a month, just letting it out. So I'm not talking about, avoiding negative feelings, but this idea that the gods are out there to destroy each other, that there's this war between Jehovah and Satan. No, the war between the gods talks about the difference between time and timelessness. The Aesir are the gods of timelessness. That's why they live in a fortress, Asgard, the fortress of the celestial gods. And that's why the Vanir live in the west. They live in the west because as you're looking at the, if you're looking at the thunder wheel, you go all the way around to the west. That is, and if you're going, it goes in a clockwise fashion, you're going further in time. The Vanir represent the gods and the powers of magic within time and space. The Vanir are called the elder gods, not because they're older than the Aesir. It's because the elder gods, they live in time and space, and they have experience. That's why they are so into joy and pleasure and happiness, just like grandparents. When your parents are telling you to do this and to clean this, and well, where do you go when you want to have fun? You go hang out with grandpa, Because Grandpa just sits in his rocking chair. He knows, man. He knows that all that running around doesn't accomplish anything, and he'll give you a candy, or, you know, he'll give you a sip of his, you know, his beer or whatever it is, and, you know, it's just, have some fun, relax. That's the Vanir, because they have experience. They've lived through things. So this war doesn't mean agitation of battling it out. It means that these are two different functions within this cosmos that we live in, and it's a beautiful interaction of dynamic interaction of essences. But anyways, you know, Susie Yoten's wife, I would recommend seriously working with me. I don't have a lot of time these days, but you and I need to talk, because I keep hearing in your questions a lot of fear-based questions, and I'm not judging you for it, but I want to help you out of that. So if you haven't read my books, read them. If you haven't done the Celestial Qigong, if you haven't done the Hool Breath, do it. And if you're still holding on to some of these things, talk to me. Now, again, I don't know you. I could be wrong. If I'm judging you incorrectly, my apologies. It won't have been the first time. I do it quite often. But anyway, yeah, it's not an oversimplification. It's not the old versus new, polytheist versus monotheist deities. It's not that at all. You know, there's a lot of ancestral that will, and people, you know, a lot of pagans will talk about the difference between the Vanir, especially people who really like the Vanir and they don't like the Aesir. By the way, people who are tend more toward the Vanir are right-brained individuals. People who are more interested in the Aesir are left-brained individuals. That's why you have the hardcore, you know, conservative, ancestral, Republican, gun-toting, and they're into the Aesir. It's because they're left-brained. Because the Aesir don't like change. They're conservative. They don't want, that's why they war with the Vanir, because they don't want time and space to come in and change their perfection. And that's why people who are attracted to the Vanir are usually progressive, liberal, and they want to you know, kind of badmouth the Aesir, and they'll say, oh, well, historically there was the hunter-gatherers who were then, you know, and getting a whole misunderstanding of history, and they were conquered by the warrior caste, and so they brought their gods in, but the older gods, no, it has nothing to do with it. When you go back in time, especially in the Vedic, you find out the Vedics is the Devis versus the Asuras. In the Norse, in the Germanic, it's the Aesir versus the Vanir. It's not old versus new. It's just the dynamic balance of what is. It's always been this way. Yin and yang. It's just part of that. So I don't see it as a war. I see it as a beautiful dance between energies in this universe that complement each other. Okay, Void Light 303. Is processing our unconscious shadow now more important given the shift we are experiencing? It's no more or less important than it's ever been. Each moment is just the moment. And in each moment, the most important thing for you to do is connect to your deepest, truest self. We now have this external shift coming through, which brings our attention to it. And so, yes, I have to say it's very important right now, but it's always important. It always has been important. This is why it's, you know, living in the now is so important. That's what living in the now is. If you live in the now, follow your deepest desires, you will always follow your true path. That's why I never buy into after death stuff and what happens after death and what happens if you get lost. Well, yeah, that happens. Souls get lost after death. They get lost in the underworld. But if you get lost in the underworld, it means you got lost in this waking life. But if you get awake in this waking life and you follow your true path, your soul's going to guide you in the underworld. It's the same. It's just a different level of reality. We got to get out of this separation of things. You know, we're just in one phase of reality, and when we leave, we'll be in another one. You know, well, you know, like I said, when I think of my fiance now, you know, like my ancestors who didn't worship idols, you know, that's one of the things that the ancient Roman historians say, that the Germanic people didn't have idols or temples; they just worshipped nature. I get it now. When I look at nature, I see my goddess fiance, who's now infinite. Okay, so Yeah, Susie Yoten's wife, who've never spoken. I recommend you get a session with me. I will change a lot of that negativity very fast. But you do have what I'm hearing in you. You've got some fear-based things that are probably very deeply held that go all the way back to childhood, and that needs to shift if you want to fully experience, the best that you can get out of life. And I'm not the only person that can help you, but I think I can anyway. All right. Natalia Lokia says, "Hail, teacher MWD. Hail, Sethikus. Good to see you both." Thank you, Natalia. Okay, question. Be more smoky. Is it safe to journey alone if you don't have journeying experience? Yes. You're not alone. You're not alone. You have your own soul to guide you, and you have masters and guides and angels and elves and whatever words you want to use. Before you go, close your eyes and ask all those entities that are here to help me on my highest path, guide me in this. Teach me. So you're never alone. Natalia Lokia, good day, teacher. Lovely to see you. Question. Prior to your last video, I've been working on a series of different breathing techniques. Have you come into contact with the Wim Hof Iceman method? Yeah, somebody else I was just talking with has done that. I'm familiar with it. I have never practiced it, but I've heard lovely things about it. So, yeah, if you have an opportunity, based on what I know, it sounds like a very powerful method. And yeah, I'd love to hear how that works out for you. Let's see. Looking for the question, Greg Shepard. In Christianity, seeing the myth for what it is. History of miracles, spiritual gifts, and ecstatic experience. Feel drawn to the Norse, unsure about Asatru, where to start? Question mark. I don't see Christianity as a mythological religion. I see Christianity has hijacked ancient mythological teachings of the pre-monotheist Hebrew people. So there is an actual record. So much of the Old Testament is made up false mythology that was created for one purpose only, which was to dominate and control. And that's why the Romans ended up adopting it and using it, because it's a great way to control people in terms of political ways. So I don't see Christianity as a myth. It was never intended to be mythological. It was intended to be taken literally. This is one of the reasons I reject it, because it is not up for interpretation. This is one of the problems with Christianity. And I run into people, listen, I grew up Christian, so I understand this. There's a very strong, strong desire, even if you know you don't believe in eternal punishment, and you don't believe in the devil, and you don't believe in God hating you, and you don't see these things literally. There's a strong desire to still wanting to super spiritualize the Jesus myth and turn it into something beautiful. In fact, I remember reading a book a long time ago called The Gospel According to Jesus. And what it was is it was a bunch of college professors who were highly intellectualized, and what they did is they sat around with the New Testament and they pulled the verses that they liked, and then they got rid of the ones that they didn't like. And I am in complete agreement with the Christians on this one. Either you take the whole thing or you take none of it. Because you can't, on the one hand, believe in the love and forgiveness of Jesus and at the same time deny the anger and the judgment of God, the Father. Because there is no need within the Christian tradition to have the forgiveness of Jesus unless God the Father wants to destroy you and eternally torment you. You can't have one without the other. That's why I reject the entire thing. So anyway, you got me kind of started on that. Read more of my books, watch more of my videos if you're new to the channel. I'm unsure about Asatru myself. I'm not an Asatru. I'm also not pagan. I am a syncretist. I'm a shaman. I'm a polytheist. And I am, as we're talking about in this video, I'm somebody who believes in the ancient tradition. And I'm trying to bring that forth. Part of what I'm doing is I'm trying to bring the ancient understanding to what has been lost to the Nordic tradition. Just let me give you one example of that. You know, you ask, I can't speak for all Asatru. I only know some of that I've run into, and some of them are more open-minded than others, and some of them are smarter than others. You know, I remember reading, you know, why does Thor wear a belt? And then there's this discussion about why Thor wears a belt. Well, you don't have to start trying to guess why Thor wears a belt if you have connection to practices that have a connection to life force energy. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, Eastern martial arts. You will see all of these people wearing large sashes around their midsection. And they do that for one reason. It helps the navel center process life force energy, and it protects the adrenal glands, because the adrenal glands are very important. This is why you shouldn't drink a lot of coffee or do a lot of nicotine. It's bad. It messes with your adrenals. My suggestion, if you want to really have good energy, you got to get rid of that stuff at some point. But the reason why, and it says in the mythology, that without Thor's belt, Thor loses half of his power. And what is that telling you if you are still connected to an ancient tradition, which when you look at old, there was an old Viking burial of the staff carrier women. I forget the name of it, but in it there was a bucket, and on the bucket was this brass thing which had a shaman in full lotus. Now, how did these guys 1,000 years ago know anything about full lotus yogic meditation? They obviously didn't learn it by going to yoga class. It means it was part of our ancient Germanic tradition. They understood about life force energy, and when you went and trained with somebody, they taught you how to meditate that way. It means it was part of our past. It means we knew, and in the mythology it's there. For the average person who wasn't called to be a shaman or a wizard or whatever word you want to use, then they would look at it as this interesting sort of comic book thing, like a magical thing. It put on the magical bell, it gives you the power. But what would happen is then they would come in and they would train with the shaman, and the shaman would say, yeah, the reason why he wears a belt is because you notice when we sit and we meditate, we focus on our navel center, and we wear the belts around our waist because it empowers us and keeps the thing warm. You know, they knew it was a science. They knew it. So this is where I differ. I don't call myself Asatru for that reason. I also, because, you know, there are a lot of really great Asatru people, but there's a lot of racist idiots. And there's a lot of people in the middle who are pretending not to be racist or battling with the whole racism thing. And the reason why, the main reason why, is because they are coming at the mythology from a post-Christian mindset. And a lot of them will simply take their Christian values and then simply paste it onto the gods. And you have to understand that our pre-Christian ancestors didn't think anything like we do today. They didn't think in dualist terms. They thought in holographic terms. So if you want to know how our ancestors thought, go talk to a Hindu. You'll see how our ancestors thought, because it's the same tradition, separated by thousands of years. Anyways, I kind of really went off on it, but that's anyway my deal. All right. Is patriarchy really to blame for everything that's wrong with the world, or is it just another symptom of the chaos of the masculine and feminine being so out of balance? So I'm kind of wanting to ask why you asked that question. It sounds like that kind of pushed a button in you. I don't know you, but it makes me wonder if you have sensitivity around men's issues and women's issues. Do you think men are being manipulated and disempowered by women? I don't know you, but that's the first thing that comes to mind when I see you put, quote, blame. So insecurity, you know, when you've got men who do not understand the feminine, and look at me. I mean, I consider myself a very masculine guy. That's how I'm wired. You know, on the spectrum of things, I'm far on the masculine spectrum. But I absolutely, when I see men who are insecure, who have been disempowered, they become abusers. They become dominant, and they become frightened of women, and they believe that women are out to get them. The whole thing, like the men, how does that go? MGTOW, men go their own way. I see such disempowered pussies. Forgive my language, but holy crap, really? These guys think that women have all this power to completely destroy them. And listen, I've had my issues. I had a bad marriage years ago, but I chose her. I picked her. I've since had many, many other incredible relationships with women who have empowered me and continue to empower me. So again, I don't know you very well, Witcher, but that's the first thing that goes off in me. So is patriarchy to blame? Patriarchy is definitely out of balance. Absolutely. And men who do not know their own power do not respect women. Men who are confident in their own power will gladly bow the knee to the feminine. Because if they truly understand what the feminine can give to the male, they will gladly surrender. Now, the feminine has to be worth it. The woman that you give yourself to has to be knowledgeable and aware and conscious and empowered within herself to understand how to empower a man. And a true woman wants to do that. She wants to empower him. And a true man wants to be empowered. That's why men get on one knee. That's why they give them the flowers and they say, will you marry me? All that stuff. You know, in traditional society, why do you think the queen is the one that has all the power on the chessboard? The king is the one, he has no power. He can barely function. Another way to look at it is that she's doing all the work in nature. The male lions sit there while the female lions go and do all the hunting. Who's doing all the hunting? Who's got all the power? Feminine has all the power. So we'll talk about that, but you know, it's not an either or. A truly empowered man, really strong, powerful man, knows where to get his power and knows that it comes from the feminine. And this is one thing we have lost, and that is why I said earlier, that's why our fairy tales, the being that you had to be afraid of was the Wicked Witch. Not because women are evil, but because if you're going to have somebody go out of balance and be a force of chaos, a woman who loses that is going to be far more dangerous than a man. That's why men want to dominate women. That's why we have a patriarchal society, is because we walked away from that power, and men unconsciously know that women have more power than they do. That's why they're afraid of them. And the great thing about the feminine is that when the feminine finds a man of power, because this is what women are looking for, you know, especially, you know, I can say women who are out of balance, what they do is they will criticize. That shows them that they are out of balance within themselves. They criticize men. Because what they're doing is it's inverted, as Sethikus said, it's inverted. Their instinct is to empower the masculine. That's their instinct. But if they are out of balance, then it'll be inverted and they will criticize. They'll cut men off. And women, you've got to understand that. You know, here's the main thing I hear when I'm doing relationship counseling is men will say, without fail, I wish she would stop nagging me. I wish she would stop criticizing me. What do women say? I wish I could count on him. I wish he would have my back. I wish he were more dependable. It's across the board. Dependable. Empowered. So a man who isn't dependable is like this, and it makes the woman want to criticize him. So, you know, if you're that way, it means you attracted somebody to point out in you your own lack of self-respect. Again, I'm not talking about Witcher. I don't know you. I'm not trying to talk at you personally. I'm just trying to give you guys a lesson in power. Listen, when it comes to martial arts, I'm not trying to say this to brag. I'm just trying to point something out. I learned what's called an internal art. If you were to look at it, you would kind of wouldn't know what the heck I was doing. You would see my hands moving in a lot of ways. You'd see some speed, but you wouldn't really know what I was doing. Every time I go up against, every now and then, an MMA guy will want to test me and he'll want to spar with me or whatever. And the few times that I've done it, they always go, how the hell did you do that? Because they're all about brute force. They're all about strength. And all it takes is a little bit of feminine energy to make that brittle man crumble. This is the power that women have. When you criticize your men, it destroys them. It crumbles them. And men, when you don't show strength, when you don't have the strength to be there for the woman, as she says, to have her back, to depend on you, then that crazy feminine energy starts looking for something to destroy. That's why, I would much rather go up against an angry man than an angry woman. Because an angry man, after 10 minutes, he might forget about it. He's going to want to punch you in the nose, and then he's going to forget about it. You get a woman pissed off at you, man, you better be careful, with the bobbit thing, where she cut off his woohoo. Anyway, I'm kind of going off, but you get my point. I could really talk about this for a long time. Question, is everything literally created by us? Yes. Like a mental projection? No, that's two-dimensional. That it's more than that. It's more than just a mental projection. You create everything. Everything is a projection. Science says this. Physicists are coming to that conclusion that what we think of as reality is merely just a projection from somewhere else, they don't know what. You create it all. Yes. What about the people? What do you mean, what about the people? Yes. See, here's the thing, two-dimensional thinking. Well, then what about other people? If they're creating the universe and I'm creating the universe, then this is what I'm talking about. This is what we've lost. Talk to a Hindu. I'll give you another example. Go to a Hindu person and ask them, is Ganesha real? They will say, oh yes, Ganesha is very real. Absolutely. Is Ganesha just a symbol? Oh yes, he's just a symbol. Is Ganesha a single god all in of himself? Yes, he is a single god all in of himself. Is Ganesha merely just a projection of the eternal oneness of what some people would call God? Yes, he is just an. You go to an ancestral, they want to talk about hard polytheism. The gods are real and they live and they have blue eyes and the blah blah blah. That comes from Christianity. Christianity reduced everything to black and white, reduced everything to God and the devil. That's why Christianity introduced the hatred of the earth. That's why the sciences doesn't understand the fact that if you talk lovingly to a plant, it grows better, and if you yell at a plant, it dies faster. They can't figure that out because physical reality and nature doesn't have feelings. There's no such thing because everything's on a two-dimensional level. That came from Christianity. Make sense? Okay, boy, I'm really, really fired up today. Sorry about that, but what the heck, what did they put in my Wheaties today? So the people are doing the same thing you are. You are creating them and they are creating you. It's all happening together. I know, I can't get my mind around it. Well, too bad. That's the way it is. That's living in a multi-dimensional universe. We live in a hologram, and each one of us is participating in the hologram. You have power to decide which channels you want to focus on. And this is why I teach Qigong, this is why I teach ritual, is because the more power that you gain, the more power that you have to decide how to change the frequency so that you can create your own timeline. You can create your own awareness. So the answer is yes. And the people are doing the same thing. Okay. Somebody's dragged down through their bedroom floor, scares the crap out of me. What's happening? I'd have to talk to you, so I don't know. I'd need more information. Amalia Lynn, I hear voices and see shifting energy. I seen angelic beings in a chariot come down from the sky several times, drawn by 2 white horses. The lion has appeared to me in my visions. Any insight? I don't know enough about it. I can't say whether it's true or not, real or not. I don't know. There is shamanism, and then there's schizophrenia. And where they meet, I don't know. I know at some point, perhaps some schizophrenics or shamans who didn't know how to handle the energy and it made them crazy. So, we have the ability to to fool ourselves with our narcissistic unconscious projections. But at the same time, you know, we can see other dimensions where angelic beings with chariots come down. I mean, I've read about that kind of stuff all the time happening to immortals. So I don't know. I would have to know more about you and talk to you to know exactly what was going on. If I could, I might not be able to, but if I were able to, that's what I would need to know. Let's see. Witcher says it sounds like victim talk. No, again, I hear a projection in that. You again put patriarchy in quotes, which means that you identify with the patriarchy. So that means when people talk about the patriarchy bringing down the feminine, it sounds this way. You feel that they're criticizing you. You identify with the patriarchy. So you're projecting onto them your own victim mentality. The only reason that anybody wants to take somebody hostage to be in control is because they feel disempowered and out of control. That's what abusers are. That's what, you know, when people take somebody hostage, that's what physical violence is. People who are physically violent, you know, especially people who you can't handle, you know, listen, I'm one of these people. Not that I don't get physically violent, but I react that way. I have a short fuse, and I have an ego issue as well. If somebody says something to me or looks at me the wrong way, my first instinct is to want to go, because that's my insecurity. If I'm truly empowered with myself, what do I care what they think? What do I care? So it's I don't see it that way at all, but I can understand why somebody would hear that. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, yeah, misogyny and patriarchy. Yeah, I guess it depends on how you look at patriarchy, how you define the word. You know, I define, you know, when people use the word patriarchal society, what they mean is men controlling everything. So that's what I'm talking about. We used to live in a society where men had their place, and they had their place of control, and then women carried the staff. They carried the men's power so that men could do whatever it is that they were supposed to do and have the power. You know, here's the thing, I talked about it earlier, is that Shakti comes to Shiva and she asks him to explain to her who she is. And he then begins to tell her everything that she is and how powerful she is, how she created the world, how she's keeping the universe running, all of that. So she is at his feet, treating him like the guru. And this is what women are looking for. They're looking for a guru who will reveal to them their power. Does that make sense? So that's not a place of, you know, men are not put underneath women when we get the right balance. You know, in fact, when women are empowered, they will uplift you. They will take men and put you on the highest mountaintop, and they will want to look up at you. But it's because the men are understanding and worshiping them as well. You know, worshiping that. So there's a dual worship going on. Anyway, I'm kind of confusing myself at this point. Ben Real, as I'm getting back into Qigong, I'm feeling a lot of popping within my body, particularly my arms, and it feels like I have 2 heartbeats sometimes. Any insight on this phenomena? I don't know. Again, I'd have to talk to you. I don't know more. I need to know more about it. What I can tell you is that what happens when you do Qigong, especially the standing postures, it opens up the meridians. And so sometimes the joints will pop open, you know, and this happens to me as well. When I do energy work, my back will sort of pop open. And so it will release the muscles and the tension in the muscles. And so I don't know. It could be all kinds of things, but my guess is that it's meridians opening within you. And when the meridians open, all kinds of things happen in the body, and it's the body adjusting itself. So I wouldn't worry about it. It should subside over time. Men stabilize women's power. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Men stabilize women's power. Control is further. Okay, all right. Looking for the question here. Okay. All right. So no more questions. So we're getting a little more time. You know what? I'll do a little bit more of the interview, and then I'm going to have to come back and we'll have to do a second installment. I don't know if we'll do that this weekend or when, but let's get back into this. First off, let me just run again the links for both Sethikus and myself, and then we'll go back and we'll do one more little segment, and then I'll have to come back and do another installment here.
Of magic, getting maybe touching upon the runes, the power of the runes a little bit, the laws of the universe, how that kind of operates, if you could.
Yeah, well, I'll just go with what's hitting me because those are all deep subjects, all of them. Runes, you know, people ask me if I'm knowledgeable in rune staves and bind runes, where you take different runes and put them together in one, and I'm not. And I think the reason I'm not because I don't believe in it, but because I don't want to mess with something I don't understand. What I've done is put runes into. Let me see if I have it here somewhere. Talk about the science. Years ago, I started working with an energy magic martial art, which dealt with the 8 gates, what the Chinese call the Bagua. And there is an art called Bagua, but you're walking around the 8 gates. This one, you're in the center, and you open up all of the 8 doorways. So that has been a major theme, and I didn't understand it, but when I started learning it, something told me, you know, the first time I felt the energy of it, something said, you have been chosen to learn this. And I didn't understand that until now. So we have 3 sets of 8 runes. So my mind always goes to the number 8. 8 is transformation. So my mind always goes there. And so I always play around with it. And so what I did was I took the 3 8s of the runes and I simply put them into the 8-sided magical wheel here. And this is what I came up with. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've got this in my books here, and you can see, you know, the 3 8s of the runes. And I thought, that's interesting. So let's play around with that. And then I started looking at the significance of each of the runes and each of the directions. So for instance, let's just take northeast for an example. The northeast in multiple traditions around the world represents what we would call Mount Olympus, the mountain of the gods, the fortress of the celestial gods. And in the Germanic tradition, Osgard means the fortress of the Os, the Aesir, the celestial deities. So when we look at that, that is the same in the Vedic tradition. It's the same in the Taoist tradition. That direction always has that power, the power of the highest ether, if you want to get into elements. So even though, like you said, you have to kind of look through the surface level of what people are saying and look beyond their specific language or their specific symbols that they use and get to the root meaning of it, it's always the same. And it's always the same with traditions that have this unbroken connection that go into prehistory. It's not the same with, say, you know, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but let's say, you know, some of the Wiccan traditions or some of the New Age Native American shamanism traditions where the directions don't have the same meaning. You know, you pick up one and it'll mean one thing, you pick up another, it means something else. But with the ancient traditions, it's always the same. And it's the same, you know, and then we could ask, did they share it with each other? Probably not. Did the Chinese go and travel to Norway and share that with them? Probably not. Or are they picking up on an ancient knowledge that has been passed down? Perhaps. Or is it that when shamans are touched and they have the ability to go there, they see that energy science and they bring it out in whatever words that they have? So that's just one example of that. So for me, the runes, if we're going to talk about the runes for me are, I'm not going to say, you know, being a syncretist, it would be nice for me to say, oh, the runes are exactly like, and to give up something else. I haven't found that. One of the things that I found, which I agree with the Hopi tradition as it's been presented to me, I can't represent the Hopi tradition because I don't know anything about it. I only know what I've read and what I've heard. But from their perspective, they say that in the ancient time, the 4 races went off into different directions to master different elements. And then at the appointed time, which would be now, right, they come back together and everybody shows what they've learned, and then they create this new syncretic model, which is what I think is happening within me.
Right, and that's beautiful what you're saying, creating the new. And this is what I've been getting as well, that we are here to, now in this hour, catch up the soul cycles, learn to remember what has been forgotten, recalibrate, and then go forward into the new.
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening, people. That's what's going on right now. And it's not to dismiss the ancient traditions. In fact, we need them to actually get back into trajectory where we actually need to be on.
Yeah.
With the last, you know, you're talking about the last 2,000 years, 3,500 years ago, man. That's when the dark ones completely took over this reality field, and then came the Dark Ages, the Vatican, and, you know, leading up to the present moment. Their jurisdiction is over now. That's why we're feeling what we are, and you're literally confirming, man, things that have been revealed not only to me but other people in my inner circle. And so this is going out. This is expanding now, and those to whom it's meant, they're picking up on it, and this is going to continue on. And what you're talking about with the runes and you know, Sade and Golder and all that, this is for me very, very, very real. The runes are very powerful, and they work.
Okay, so I want to stop the interview with him there, and I'll do a second installment and go further. There's a couple things that I want to say. First, I want to go back to, you know, Witcher's statement. He said something which I do actually agree with here. And again, my apologies. I hope it didn't sound like I was attacking him in any way, whatever. But he talked about here, patriarchy versus matriarchy sounds black and white thinking, and I completely agree. If you've noticed, I don't say that we need to replace patriarchy with matriarchy. I'm just simply pointing out any archy, you know, any ruling, controlling, whatever, is out of balance. So if there were a matriarchy and we were, you know, and I hear this, when I hear women talk like this, and I don't hear it a lot lately, but, you know, when I used to hear talk about, you know, the ancient religion was matriarchal, you know, they're only, again, speaking in half-truths. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you that the fundamental matrix of the universe is feminine, which includes the masculine comes out of the feminine. So I will say that, but to say that the original religion was we only worship the mother goddess, that again is a projection from I think, from somebody from of the feminine persuasion who feels disempowered, and they're overcompensating to get their power back. So they want to, it's like what atheists do. Atheists really, in my opinion, don't believe in nothing. They just don't want to believe in Jehovah. And who does? Once you realize how ridiculous the whole Jehovah idea is, who doesn't want to get rid of it? But unconsciously, they still believe in Jehovah. So instead of just getting rid of Jehovah and opening themselves up to something different, they just say there is no such thing as any god or goddess, because any talk about spirituality to them brings them back to what their unconscious belief is, which is monotheism. So the same thing, whenever you're disempowered, you always overcompensate. So for men who have been disempowered by women, they do the mitgao, the men go their own way, or migtao, men go their own way, and we don't need women. Well, that's somebody who really unconsciously, desperately wants the feminine in them. And when you have the same thing, when you have women who hate men, who have problems with men, and they want to say, oh, there's no such thing as male, and the feminine is the only thing, and it was the real one, and then patriarch. That's their projection of their disempowerment. So there is no archy one way or another. There is the balance of the yin and the yang. And there's a lot to be said for why there are so many religions that focus on, like if you go to India, you'll see that a lot of the people who are Shakti worshippers will be men. It's not, and it's not because they're trying to be women or have gender identity issues. It's because they understand that to be fully male, they need the feminine. So it may sound like I'm talking about matriarchy versus patriarchy, but I'm not. I'm just talking about my experience. I mean, for me, and it started with me wanting to be a badass fighter. So I went into this martial art, which is kind of an assassin martial art, this secret thing. And because I wanted the power that these guys had, the speed and the power was unbelievable, and I wanted that out of my own, out of my own insecurity. So insecurity is good if it drives you towards something that will empower you. But then they started talking to me about, you got to lose all that muscle, you got to tap into the feminine, and that was really hard for me. But I wanted their power, and when they could, they just barely touch me, and a bomb would go off inside of me, and they said that's the power of the feminine. Then I go, okay, well, I want that. So that's where I'm coming from with that. Anyway, so I'm going to answer some more. Let me see if there's anything else. There's some other things that he was saying that I forgot because I got so caught up in that that I'm not remembering. But he said some things. He'll say little things that will spark things in me that make me want to talk about some really important things. But I'll have to come back and see if I found it again. Okay. Let me see. Any questions here? Natalia Loca, question. Would you say that the traditions with an unbroken connection into prehistory give us context of mindset to create the new? Yeah, that would be a great way to put it, Natalia. You have a great way with words. I like that. But that's exactly what I would say. It's like it's an evolving thing, and without going back to the basics, you can't, right? You want to be a physicist, you got to learn mathematics. You got to learn addition and subtraction first. If you don't know that, you can't get into the other stuff. So, not to say that the ancient traditions are, ultra simplistic or anything, but that's exactly right. It gives us a context to understand how to evolve into the new way of doing things. Do we need to relearn how to think? I would say so. We need to know the difference between the intellect and the mind. And when people say the mind now, what they mean is the intellect. And the intellect is subservient to the mind, but the intellect always rebels against it. And so we've moved into a time, and fear, by the way, fear drives the intellect. So people who are overly intellectual, and dogmatic, because the intellect likes hard and fast rules for things. A lot of times, this is why you see so many people in like fundamentalist religions who are incredibly frightened, and that's why they're so angry, and that's why they're so violent, and that's why they're so exclusive, and they badmouth anything and anybody else that's not their deal. So yeah, understanding the mind versus the intellect, which is what I think human means. Man means mind. It doesn't mean intellect. It means mind. That meant that our ancestors worshipped the power of the mind more than the intellect, and that the intellect is meant to work with the mind, because the mind can be too expansive sometimes, so the intellect will categorize things, but it should help us to think more clearly, as opposed to getting us lost into detail, which is one of the things that I do. Okay. All right. So Alicia Cole had put a message there just letting you know that it got automatically held for review, so you may have put a link or something in there. Anytime somebody puts a link in there, it automatically gets deleted. So in any case, I don't know what that was, but I'm sorry. In case it was something good, I'm sorry I missed it. Okay, so that's it. Yeah, we're coming up to 2 hours, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this here, and we'll do another segment. And I'll see if I have time tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow, and we'll keep going. But again, if you want to connect with Sethikus, I know that he does. I think he does Western astrology, and I know he teaches a lot of other stuff. He's got a lot of other students, and I need to, do my homework on him and find out more about him. You can go to Black Earth Productions with a Z.com, blackearthproductions.com, and then his YouTube channel is Black Earth Productions. So yeah, I'm looking forward to working more with him, and I like it when people expand my mind. I don't know everything that he teaches. I know he comes from, I think, more of a magical perspective. So he's got a lot of information about stuff that I don't know. But, where I really appreciate him so far, again, he's got this power to really get you to see the infinity and the infinity of possibilities. Really amazing stuff there. So I'm appreciative of him for that. He's definitely had a powerful impact on my channel and on me, so I look forward to us working together more. Let's see. Teacher, The Tree of Yggdrasil by Sethikus Boza is one of the most key and relevant for rune workers. This is from Natalia Lokia. So there you go. We'll have to look into that. All right, so that's it for today, my friends. Let's see here. I'm gonna once again I'm gonna show you again. I don't know. I'm so into this. I'm still in this weird place where I'm grieving. I still grieve and I still cry pretty much on a daily basis. And I go through the whining of why isn't she still here and all my plans and all that. But I've decided I'm not going to let the sadness and the fear put me in a place where I want to drive away the memory of my fiance. Instead, I want it to expand. And this is what I see now. And maybe this is why I'm getting so off on the whole feminine thing, because I see, now that I have this time to reflect back on her and things that she said and things that she did, it empowered me in a way that no other being has ever been able to do, which is why I'm turning her into a goddess. I'm going to start worshiping her. In fact, it's not even a choice. I can't help it, because she's given to me what only a divine being can. And, I used to joke around with her when we'd be out to lunch or something and we'd get into a conversation and she would say something to me or connect with me in a way or reflect back to me in a way that took away, here's the thing about my experience with relationships. There's usually always like a few different things you kind of have to keep to yourself, because otherwise they're going to get jealous or they're going to get upset, or there's some secrets you just can't share. And it's like, so you do your best, and you got to be careful not to step on anybody's toes and all that, and then all the ego and all that. And I never had that with her. In fact, I can say this, when it came to her, there was literally nothing I could say or do that would upset her or anger her or make her insecure or jealous. Nothing. And that empowered me in such an incredible way that, you know, I got to tell you again, women, I guess men too, jealousy makes people want to seek something else. When you start making somebody feel guilty for thinking about others or fantasizing about others, you make them want to do that even more. And she, because she was the only person I've ever known that had zero jealousy, because of that, I never even thought of anybody else. Ever. I was like, why would I think of anybody else? I got this in front of me. And there was one thing that she said to me, talking about this male and female thing that nobody's ever said to me before. But she said, she would say, you know why I'm so attracted to you? And I'd say no. She says, because I can see that you're masculine and you're also feminine. I don't know what she was talking about, to be honest with you, because I don't see that when I look at myself. But because of my history and because I've worked so hard to tap into the feminine to gain that masculine power, she obviously saw that, and it was something that really excited her, you know, physically and mentally and emotionally and other things. And, you know, I think about that. I think about a lot of things that she did. And I used to joke about, you know, when we would be sitting together and we would connect and she would say something or respond to me in such a way that I would be floored that this is a woman that I'm with and she's talking this way to me and it's so perfectly. I would joke and I say, you know, one of these days you're just going to disappear. You're like this goddess that came down and you're going to disappear one day. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask people, hey, did you see the girl I was with here yesterday? And they're going to say, there wasn't anybody here. You were talking to the air. You know, and that's kind of the feeling that I have, that she really did. She just floated down and was this amazing being, and she's gone now. And now it leaves me with this perfection that I get to worship, which is this. Okay, so enough of that going on. I'm just going to double check just to make sure there aren't any last minute questions. It doesn't look like it. Okay, so I don't see any questions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Thank you for allowing me to rant and rave. Thanks again for Sethikus Boza for allowing me to be interviewed by him. And I highly recommend that you go check out his channel and check out his website. And I am also going to do that. So until perhaps tomorrow, my friends, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you. May the power of the ancestors and may the power of the ancient ones bring us back into a dynamic balance with our universe. Yeah,
And
they are, you know, and I can only share my experience.